Hi everyone, this is Yana Smakula sharing a new video tutorial for Altenew. Today I'm going to focus on rather simple ways to watercolor outline images. I have two similar but slightly different cards to share, both using identical supplies from Altenew. I'm going to be using a couple of things today. I have beautiful Japanese peonies stamp set. I will be using images from this set to do my coloring. And I also have a set of matching dies to cut the colored images out. I want to watercolor both large peonies in this set as well as a couple of leaves for my card. Now this set also has some great additional images which will help you to create beautiful flower clusters on your project. You have like these fun swirls in different sizes and some smaller leaves too. There's also one smaller peony with leaves for you to use as well. A very beautiful set, and I know there are lots of gorgeous samples on the Altenew blog using this set, so be sure to check them out. Next, I have sentiments and quotes. This one is actually one of my favorite sets. I reach out for it more often because it has lots of great sentiments and sayings. Some short ones like hugs, and then some longer ones like I'm here for you or you are my happy place. There are also a couple of quotes in here which I have already used on a few of my previous Altenew cards. I'm going to use "You are in my thoughts and prayers" and "to someone who makes others happy" for my today's projects. I also plan to incorporate one of the gorgeous Altenew trims onto my cards. If you haven't checked those out, be sure to do so. These are exquisite and they add that wow element to any project. Simply gorgeous. Finally, for the coloring part, for the watercoloring part, I've picked a few watercolor pencils from Faber Castell and a water brush. I've had these pencils for a long time, probably more than 2 years, but I think this is like the third or maybe the fourth time that I'm using those. Now, these are awesome for watercolor techniques. There's lots and lots you can do with them, even if you're not a real artist like me, so I highly recommend these pencils. Now, I was planning to use pink and green for my projects, but as it turns out, I do not have any green pencils, so this is why I'm using Aquacolors instead. Now, I've already gone ahead and heat embossed a couple images onto white cardstock using white embossing powder. I've used stamps from the Japanese peonies set, and you can see I have flowers and leaves here. Now note that this is not watercolor paper. I am not using watercolor paper for these cards. This is plain old white cardstock, and it's actually Nina Solar White to be exact, so no watercolor paper. I didn't want to use watercolor paper for this project as watercolor paper has texture and it's not that easy to heat emboss a detailed image or an image with a thin outline onto that texture. I knew right away that it's not going to look good and it's not going to be perfect, so I just used regular smooth cardstock instead. Now, before I start coloring, I want to show you a few other samples that I did. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do for this card, so I practiced a little bit before I got started. I first wanted to heat emboss those onto gray cardstock using silver embossing powder, and here you can see those images on my work surface. I colored one using a silver watercolor pencil from Faber Castell. You can see some shading there on the image. I also colored some using alcohol marker. This one was done using a chameleon pen. I really love that pop of color on the gray cardstock, very unusual. And here are a few more examples done using alcohol markers, some colored with Copics and then some more colored with chameleon pens. Anyhow, let's start watercoloring our peonies. So there are a few ways that this can be done, and I will show you 2 of them in this video. My favorite way to color heat embossed images like this is not by using a pencil directly, but rather by picking up the color from the pencil by using a water brush. So this is like picking up color from a paint set. In my case, I do not have a paint set, I have a pencil, and I'm using a water brush to grab that color like I'm doing here. I like to have my water brush wet before picking up the color. If you come in with a dry water brush, you won't get any pigment on your brush, so make sure to get it wet. As I'm applying the color onto my image, I'm going to squeeze the brush some more to get some more water there and therefore dilute the color and spread it onto the petal. Now, I'm not a pro when it comes to coloring. I do not think that I'm coloring things the way that they should be colored, the way they're supposed to be colored, but I'm rather coloring them the way that I like to color. Crafting is supposed to be fun, it's not supposed to be stressful, so I try not to stress about my coloring. I try to color just the way that I like. Now, in order to make my flowers realistic, I'm going to create lighter and darker areas on the petals. I'm going to make the roots of the petals darker and the ends of the petals lighter. The roots are brought closer together, so less light is hitting those areas, making them darker. The ends of the petals are loose, so more light is hitting those areas, making them lighter. If there's a petal in front of a different petal, it's going to drop some shadow on the petal behind it. So the one behind it is going to be a bit darker, and the one in front of it is going to be a bit lighter. If you have a hard time picturing what has to be lighter and what has to be darker, go ahead and Google some photos of peonies, or better yet, treat yourself to a few beautiful peonies. Put them in a vase and look at them, glance at them as you're coloring, paying attention to the shadows and the colors. This will be very helpful, and honestly, who doesn't want to have some fresh flowers at home, right? I know I do. Okay, so I'm going to intensify the roots of the petals by adding even more color to those areas of my flower. I'm picking up more pigment and adding it directly to the roots of the petals using my water brush. So this was coloring option number 1, where we didn't use the actual pencil to lay down the color, but rather used a water brush to pick up the color and apply it onto the paper. Now I'm going to color the leaves of my peonies by adding a bit of color to the images using the pencils themselves, and then blending the color and adding more color, a different color, a darker one, using a water brush. This is actually my least preferred method of coloring, but I still wanted to share it in this video to give you some options. Now, since I'm coloring a heat embossed image that has a raised outline, I'm constantly hitting that outline with my pencil. And if I hit too hard, I can break it or damage it, and damage the embossed edge, which I obviously do not want. When I'm using a brush, I am not hitting the outline, I'm simply following the outline. So for me, it's kind of harder to apply color to my heat embossed images using a pencil. I prefer to pick up the color using a brush and then add it to my image that way. I also do not like to go with the pencil directly to the paper, as sometimes, depending on the paper and depending on how hard you push onto the pencil, you can have those harsh color lines which are rather difficult to blend. I'll show you an example later on in my video. I also like to use a brush to apply color to the paper rather than a pencil because I'm getting a more intense color. I like my colors to be vibrant, to be bright, to be intense, and I like to get the maximum darkest color that I can. I'm able to achieve this when I'm using a water brush. You can also get the maximum darkest color when your pencil is wet. Try this. Lay down some color using a dry pencil and then dip it lightly into water and color right next to the first sample. You'll see a huge difference in color intensity. Now, one more thing that I wanted to mention. You do not have to use a water brush for this. You can most definitely use a paintbrush. I chose to use water brush because I'm able to control the flow of water much better. I'm applying much less water onto my paper. Since I am not using a watercolor paper but regular cardstock, which is not designed to take water, I do not want to have a whole lot of moisture there. So water brush is the best option for me, but paintbrush will work just as well. So let's go back to the flower. I'm going to use a pink pencil and apply color directly to my flower, to those areas that I believe will be darker. I will then come in with a clear water brush. I do not have any pigment there, and will blend the color out to create a soft blend for my petals. It's not as easy to blend or to spread color as I'm not using watercolor paper, but you can still see the difference between the two types of coloring here. I personally prefer the first method and I find it easier, but you might like the second one best. Now, if you've never used watercolor pencils before, be sure to try both methods and decide which one is best for you. After I finished coloring my images, I used matching dies from Altenew and cut them out. Here I have the different colored peonies. The top one was colored using the second way, and if you look closely, you can kind of see those unblended harsh pencil lines. Whereas the other flowers have no harsh lines like that. They are blended, the color is blended nicely. So now it's time to put our card together. I've created an A2 top folding card base, and before I add my flowers, I want to add some drops of ink there. I'm using a spray ink from Here Arts. Any spray ink will work just fine for this, and I'm going to create some small drops on the front of my card. I'm going to do this by lightly tapping on the tube. This can also be done by using a paintbrush, and you can actually get drops of different sizes when you use different paintbrushes, like a small paintbrush and a large paintbrush. I wanted to have small, tiny drops here, so the tube from the spray bottle worked well for me. I'm going to arrange my colored and die-cut elements onto my card front and plan the card design out. I want to have pink flowers as well as aqua leaves there, plus a beautiful gold trim die cut on top, and finally a gold heat embossed sentiment. I've adhered the die cut elements directly onto my card base using glue, and I'm going to use foam tape to add the sentiment and the gold trim. I do not want everything to be flat there, so this is why I'm going to use foam adhesive. I'm first going to add a strip behind the sentiment, adhere it onto the trim element, and then add another piece to the back of the trim. This way, I'll make sure no adhesive is showing on my finished project. I also decided I was lacking gold in this card, so I grabbed a gold smooch ink from Clear Snap and added a couple of gold dots in between the pink ones to my card base. I think those tied the gold trim and the gold sentiment nicely together. I also created one more card. The design is identical, but there are less elements there. There are no pink drops in the background, as I know that not everybody likes a messy look like that. There are less flowers, and of course the sentiment is different. Now there are, however, a few drops of gold ink on the card, which I actually ended up adding at the very last moment. It was sort of like a last-minute decision. I'm very happy with the way both of the cards turned out, and I honestly had a blast coloring these peonies. I'm going to go ahead and color some more, maybe use different colors of pencils. I actually find coloring kind of relaxing and therapeutic, so I'm excited to color these some more, and I actually encourage you to do the same. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below or in the blog post. If you like this video and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to this channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!